Good morning and thank you for joining us. This is FCT Brief. The debate on tackling insecurity in Nigeria has once again taken the spotlight as President Bola Tinubu is advocating for the creation of state police across the country. The proposal, long considered controversial, is now generating renewed attention amid rising security concerns. Speaking at a high-level security meeting in Abuja, the president stressed that empowering states with their own police forces will not only enhance rapid response to local threats, but also ease the burden on federal security agencies. The president maintained that state policing, if carefully implemented, would help address peculiar security challenges faced in different regions, from insurgency in the northeast, banditry in the northwest, to farmer-herders clashes and kidnappings across the country.
While the proposal is receiving support from some governors and stakeholders, critics have raised concerns about potential abuse by state governments, as well as issues of funding and training. Security experts, however, argue that with the right framework, accountability and the state police could be the game changer in Nigeria's fight against insecurity. The call for state police is not new, but with President Tinubu throwing his weight behind it, momentum may be building for constitutional amendments to make it a reality. Nigerians now await how lawmakers, security agencies, and civil society groups will respond to this bold proposal. Malam Baba Yusuf is a strategist, policy advisor, public intellectual, and the group CEO, Global Investment and Trade Company, and he is here with us in the studio.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Happy Eid.
Thank you very much. Likewise, TJ.
Hope you came with a salami.
No time for that now.
This Eid Maulud, no
Exactly.
But it's a time of reflection.
Exactly.
For peace and unity.
All right.
Okay. Let's quickly hit the ground running. Our state police, and it's as if the executive, the legislature, Nigerians have not come in terms with the fact that it is now or never. What's your thoughts?
Well, it's an exciting moment for us. I recall that Mr. President triggered this process last year. I remember I had to write on my weekly back page column on The Nation, Fridays, and we supported the fact that we need to have state police. Of course, there are concerns about abuse and all that, which is very crucial. We'll discuss it during this interaction. But the point is, at a point in time, we must make progress. And one of the crucial progress in Nigeria is to enact state police. So for myself, as GCO, GITC, we are proponents of this and will follow through the legislative process to ensure that we have a robust legislation, to ensure that state police is not just enacted or activated, but we ensure that we make provisos within the legislative framework to ensure that we protect the citizens of these countries and their allies from abuse by state governors that would like to take advantage of state police for peculiar interests.
Very recently, we saw Zamfara State Governor say that he could end banditry in 2 months if only he controlled security agencies in his state. That sounds to me more like a political statement, because ordinarily, shouldn't he be in charge of the security situation in his state, being that he is the governor, and that is, the first point of call when it comes to protecting lives and property in the state level? What do you think about that?
Well, His Excellency Governor Lawal Dere, like you rightly said, I will agree with you to an extent, is sounding very political. We know that there is no love lost between himself and the Minister of State for Defense, and there's a lot of bric-a-brac, not just in his own case, but in the case of other state governors, successor versus predecessor issues. But on a more serious note, I watched his interaction and I heard what he said loud and clear. The deeper issues of, the multidimensional challenges of insecurity in Nigeria is a fact. And we need to take it dispassionately and listen to governors like that. You heard Governor Zulum 2 months ago. He has been consistently on this issue. I consider him one of the most proactive, governors in Nigeria. He came into insecurity in his state and he has been facing it. So that being said, yes, but I don't think fighting insecurity and crushing it within 2 months, like His Excellency Lord is saying, is not possible because we already have deeply rooted issues. Remember Eshomomo and TGSU. If we go back to the international scene, when Russia, moved in to occupy Ukraine, we all thought that it was going to be a walkover. Maybe 3 months, 6 months, it will be done and dusted. We see what is happening. We see the escalation. We see other issues coming on board. Also, when America went to Afghanistan decades ago. So insecurity is not 1 + 1 is equal to 2, especially in our terrain. But I hear the governor loud and clear, the desperation to have state police. Whether it is for the right or the wrong reasons, the governors have to write a sound out. Let us support them to have it, albeit with the safeguards to ensure that there are no abuse, or they don't use them as instrument to be fighting each other while governance suffers.
Okay, let's look at the structure of police as it is now.
Yeah.
And because with it, we'll be able to now understand how the state police also should be structured.
Correct.
Now, the structure of the of police as it is now is not too effective, especially if you take a look at the funding. Shouldn't we also be talking about how to fund the state police? Because even the federal police now is not properly funded. For instance, if you take a look at in the U.S., the president is the commander-in-chief. The various state governors are also commander-in-chief. When President Trump said he was going to move the National Guard, different state governors came up and said no, because the Constitution places on the governor of a state to deploy the National Guard, and they said they will not do it. Now, is it possible to have a structure like that will place certain responsibility to the constitutions on the state, on the governor in charge of the state police, and also on the president in charge of whatever is the federal police?
That's a brilliant question, Eshomomo. And part of what we are doing in GIC with regards to our area of policy strategy, actually we took that into consideration.
Talking about funding, which Eshomomo asked you about. So tell us, what do you think the framework for funding should look like for this idea?
Thank you. So like I was saying, at GICC, we've already started dimensioning it. Like I said, it's a very valid question. First of all, like Eshomomo mentioned, the federal police, as it were, that is vested with the critical internal security in Nigeria, is facing not just funding issues, structural issues, man and material challenges, which are not just aligned to funding. Of course, critical is funding. Today, we have less than 400,000 boots on the ground for the Nigerian police, of a ratio of about 1 to about 500 Nigerians, 1 policeman to about 500 Nigerians. We have not addressed that issue. I remember the Inspector General of Police last year was raising this concern, requiring about 190,000, more, men, boots on the ground to be recruited. And for us at GITC, we even feel he's being conservative. They need more because we have about 250 million, Nigerians, that they are supposed to serve and protect. So funding is crucial. And why we are talking about funding, to talk about the framework that will support the funding, and also to look at the interagencies, support, the immigration, the Nigerian security and civil defense, the Nigerian armed forces. We have a total of less than 800,000 boots on the ground of the entire Nigerian armed forces, military and paramilitary, TGSU and Shomomo. This is a really serious issue. And don't forget, the forest guard that we have had are not part of this. Don't forget, the mining protection outfit is a subset of the Nigerian Civil Defense Corps. So there is really need to improve capacity, human capacity, for the Nigerian police and the Nigerian armed forces at the federal level. Because from a strategic perspective, if we are now refocusing, which is traditional in Nigeria, we will now be focusing on state police and forget that we have the critical security architecture that is federal that must be continuously funded and supported while we are unveiling the state police. Because during the course of discussion, we realize that even though the state police is crucial, they will have limitations. You mentioned the issue of the National Guard, versus the federal government in America, which is a very good model. But then what we are saying is to support that. During this deliberation to add to the funding, we have identified some crucial areas, posers for the leaders of thought, for legislators. And that is, what will be the role of state police? We need to have clearly defined boundaries between the state police and the federal police. Because even now you will see sometimes sometimes arms are being drawn between military and police in some cases when there are crises, or between the bodyguards of a governor and the bodyguards of another government functionary at federal level. So if we don't address that issue of the interplays and the interplaying roles between state police and federal police, what will be the state of play where there are escalations, and what will be the standard operating procedures and the protocols, and what are the clear lines of boundaries and authority and accountability. We need to address that at the foundation level of formulating the state police legislation. But before we do that, I also don't want us to lose the sight of the fact that, as it were now, since last year, 2 years ago, there is dire need to continue kitting, tooling, and hiring for the Nigerian armed forces, and also reviewing the doctrine of at the federal level. Today, we are always having crises of human rights violation, issues of abuse of power at the federal level. Now, I cringe in my seat when I now think of what will happen when we have state police with overbearing governors, and these state police are only accountable to the governors without any framework to say, how do we now come from the federal level to win or to save the people of the state when the governor is overreaching? So these are crucial aspects. But talking about funding again, we have a situation whereby not all the states in Nigeria are even paying the minimum wage, as it were, of 70,000 naira. And governors are saying they want state police. How are they going to fund that? That is a very crucial question that the governors also need to start telling people from the point of view of accountability and transparency. It's not enough for you to say you can trash banditry within 2 months. How are you going to fund it?
It's a very valid points you've raised there concerning how this is going to be structured, and this now rests on the table of the National Assembly, of course. If this eventually comes to them, do you see them treating this as an urgent matter, or is just going to be another partisan battlefield?
One of the crucial success factors of governance in Nigeria or anywhere in the world is political will. We have a president that is front-facing and a determined person when he wants something done. He raised this issue last year. It was, after a while, taken down. Now he has brought it to the table. And then there is what you call the urgency of the time. Tijesu and Ishomomo. This is a reality we have to face. So I think all stakeholders are now on board. Even for the critics and cynics, I think the concern is about the potential abuse and the potential unaccountability and all that. But I would say to them, we don't just sit on our hands and say we're not going to do it. A process of evolution will come with pains, will come with losses, albeit we improve as we progress. And because we have the benefit of hindsight and we have the benefit of knowing who we are dealing with, it now behoves on the legislation and people like us, the media, the thought leaders, to make input during the process of legislation to ensure that it is not abused, and then to ensure that there's effective cash backing by the governors, because we are not expecting them again to go to the federal government cap in hand to collect money to fund their state police.
Okay. Even as it is now, most state governors play a significant roles in funding the police.
Yes.
Because you see them buy vehicles and all that for the police. Yes. And also, I think my question is, the National Assembly should be the one that will play the biggest role, because you have a lot of agencies that they might need to take a look at. You have the Civil Defense Corps, for instance. It's a federal structure.
Absolutely.
So where will the civil defense have its limitation when it comes to operating in a particular state? You have Forest Guard that is under a federal control, and you have all those thoughts coming up. Lawmakers are making those thoughts. So shouldn't it also include taking a holistic look at all the security apparatus created by the National Assembly so that we can come up with an effective policing structure?
Yeah, one of the things that we are doing, and everybody should do, part of the legislation, is to do what you call gap analysis. We are doing it. A gap analysis to say, when we have this, where will be, I mentioned earlier, the boundaries of accountability, right? Boundaries of power, points of escalation, points of interplay, protocol, standard operating procedures. Those are the things that will ensure that on one hand, the existing agencies, as it were, NSC, DC, Nigerian police, everybody play their role in a way and manner that there are no frictions or there are no clashes. Don't forget, when we start this, we will have this, I call, in Nigeria, we call it initial gragra. The moment these people have this in their hand, you will see them maybe overstepping their boundaries at the state level or vice versa. Because also for those that are there also, you have this inertia to say, oh, you are taking this power from us. So those processes are the job of the National Assembly to ensure that we have a gap assessment, potentially so, and bridge those gaps to ensure that these things don't happen. Of course, they will happen because we are human beings. You are taking some powers from the federal security agencies, you are domiciling them at the state level, or you are creating new power blocks, as the case may be, at the state level. So naturally, there will be that natural process of adaptation that will take place. But how we framework our laws is what will make it easier, or what will end up what will have a wishy-washy process. Why? Because most of these legislators have also the ears of their governors. If we allow them, and that is where we are crucial as Nigerians, we don't just throw it at the table of the National Assembly. By the way, the state assemblies also have to pass those laws. Yeah. And we know that almost 95% of the state assemblies are at the behest of the governors. So the citizens must sit up to say, you know, to whom much is given, much should be expected. Yeah. We should not just pass these laws, allow them to pass this law as if we are passing one normal law. This can change the entire structure of this country. So we should take it serious to follow through the public hearings and ensure that where the lawmakers did not see an area, we deal with it. Or where they are trying to play some games to ensure that they pander to the whims and caprices of their governors, we ensure that it doesn't happen. If we don't do that and we allow the laws to pass, the disaster that will happen before we go through a constitutional review is not something we want to contemplate. So we should do what we call in Yoruba, die die.
Interesting. Well, it's a good one that a lot of people are open to this idea. However, there are some critics that say this is just an attempt to score political points. Look at the 2027 election just around the corner. And yes, we're having this conversation because that is what it is believed to be a clamor among a widespread of people. And some people also say that, you know, when this is, if it's implemented before that election, we could see an abuse of power in terms of using these individuals to rig elections. How do we put structures in place to avoid this kind of fears that have been raised?
Again, legislation. Secondly, citizens' participation. I have been saying it like a broken record. The elites of this country have been systematically failing the polity. We sit down and become innocent, we become bystanders, albeit after the process we become critics. Eshomomo and TJ, I will use this opportunity to call on all well-meaning Nigerians, especially the elites, the elected ones, to come and be part of this process of legislation of the state police. Because that is the only way we will ensure that we have a robust, legislation that for this very important, process that we should have. We cannot say because of election. We cannot say because of the fight between successors and predecessors we will not have state police. It's a critical success factor to dealing with our internal security issues in Nigeria. So we face that reality from the point of view of making input into that. All subject matter experts, all thought leaders, we should eyeball this and scrutinize and ensure that through the process we are making contributions and to ensure that those safeguards are there. Don't forget, before independence, there was native authority. It's a kind of state police. Don't forget, we have Hisba in Kano, we have Bebiyagu in Ebonyi, we have Amatekun in Southwest. 2023, around February 2023, the Justice Rilwan, I think, of Federal High Court Abakaliki, had to pass a judgment to scrap or suspend Bebiyagu because of abuse of power and extrajudicial killings. So, but now that we are doing it, the National Assembly is crucial, like you mentioned, because it is what they will do that will cascade to the state level. Okay. But our input is crucial in the legislative process.
Now, talking about our input, I remember before now we had this call by Nigerians for reform of the Police Act.
Yes.
And people were even talking about NSAS and all that.
Yes.
Shouldn't this be a good opportunity where we talk about citizens' rights?
Yes.
So that the reform police, whether it is the federal police or the state police, the primary thing will be how to respect the rights of Nigerians. Not just creating the structure, but to ensure that this structure understands that Nigeria first.
Correct. Now, to correct that, the judge's name is Justice Riemann Fatun of the Federal High Court, Abakaliki. This point you mentioned, Eshomomo, is very crucial. And that is why now is the time for us to go in and what they call a law front load all those issues as part of the legislative process for this state police now. And to use the opportunity to address these issues of abuse of office, extrajudicial killings, by even the Nigerian police or the Nigerian army or all the armed forces, as it were, while we address, because the danger is this. If you even go back to the bigger advanced models, using the United States of America, for example, for those that understand how it works there, at the sheriff county level, which is like local government and state level, the abuse is higher than at federal level. It is easier for a sheriff in a county somewhere in the United States to commit atrocities for years than for an FBI agent to do it. So if now we have critical issues to deal with at federal level, and we are not addressing, that is why we talked about the doctrine. Part of the issues to deal with during legislation is the doctrine. The doctrine guides the thinking and the culture. And since you are creating a new entity, the culture should drive it. So if at the fathers and the grandfathers, grandmothers and grandmothers and mothers at the police, NCSD, immigration and the armed forces are having these weaknesses, and we have not addressed it from a citizen's point of view, citizen participation point of view, you can imagine, I don't want to even think what will happen with these governors having this humongous power, with these people that are now going to be converted and armed, and then you are not able to address the issue of doctrine even at federal level. What we are going to have is what we shouldn't contemplate, because we can have an offensive between state actors, federal and state, while the bandits and the kidnappers will be there. And that this issue of doctrine will also deal with people that are at subnational or federal playing the game with the bandits, and then you have armed them. So what we are having is we are going to embolden more people with the law to continue being in cahoots with the people we are trying to neutralize.
So are you suggesting that this idea should have some sort of federal influence as well, and not just function independently, so that we'll have, when it's abused, we'll have them regulate, reprimand where they go wrong?
Absolutely. That's what we talk about, the safeguards in the GITC policy strategy proposal, to say if A, B, C happen as part of the protocol, just like we have the provision in the Constitution for the state of emergency, to say the president or the National Assembly, based on ABC scenario, will come in and declare that that state police is suspended and move in the federal, troops or police to take over pending the issues are addressed. Just like you see, baby President Donald Trump is abusing it somehow, but those safeguards are there in the Constitution of the United States of America. And where necessary, the federal government will come and take charge. Those are the buffers we must have more in the case of Nigeria as a nascent democracy, and we are creating something that is new, that is subject to abuse by those bad people, bad governors as the case may be, because we have the good ones. But then absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Exactly.
Malam Baba Yusuf, it's a pleasure speaking with you once again
Likewise,
this morning.
Thank
you so much for your contribution.
Thank you for having me.